Greetings. In translating ancient texts and working on a little booklet. Interestingly enough, if after 100 years of relativity and quantum mechanics, the best that we have are people like Leonard Susskind, PhD of theoretical physics. He's extremely well renowned. And the late great, there's nothing great about him, Richard Feynman. By the way, I'd actually like you to look at a video. It's only a few minutes long, and there's like 100 copies of it on YouTube. Richard Feynman. Type in Richard Feynman on magnetism. There's a British interviewer asking Feynman how magnetism works, and he's not trying to trick him. And Feynman, puts his hands together and he squiggles and worms around in his chair like a frog on a hot plate. And of course, he never either explains what magnetism is, which is okay. It's okay not to know things. The error always lies in these hubristic idiots of academia that pull the wool or the fleece over everybody's eyes and make everybody think, the less intelligent people anyway, that they know what they're talking about. It's kind of like the emperor's new clothes, right? Everybody's convinced he's wearing fine clothes when really, of course, he's naked. There's a great old parable, by the way. I think it was Hans Christian Andersen that came up with that one, wasn't it? But the best that we actually have is Richard Feynman, after Faraday, Steinmetz, Heaviside, James Clerk Maxwell, and all these great scientific minds. There's still, except for me, I know that sounds really hubristic, but I am the only person that's actually explained what magnetism is. And it's absolutely impossible to explain it if you come in with a preconception, a belief in the consensus. And current consensus is something the ancient Greeks destroyed thousands of years ago, and it's atomism. The Michelson-Morley experiment was not only not an experiment by true definition, it certainly never disproved the ether. And I don't mean this is going to sound really crazy, but you can look in the books for yourself to verify. You can even go on Wikipedia. The current PhD particle physicists of quantum and relativity will tell you flat out that what is going on between two magnets is virtual photons, which is as ridiculous as saying unicorn dust. It's absolutely ridiculous. Virtual particles or virtual photons are not the input or output of any experiment ever done. They're actually accurately described by one idiot of quantum mechanics as, well, these are not the inputs or outputs of any experiments, but they make our equations balance out. They're completely arbitrary conceptual creation to fall in line with atomistic thought. The ether, this invisible medium, of course exists. There's only the ether, every form of energy, which, by the way, if you ever really want to trip up somebody that's a PhD of physics, just ask them to define energy. Ask them to define how magnetism works. Ask them to define instantaneous action at a distance. Ask them to explain how light speeds back up after it leaves a medium like glass or water without breaking the law of conservation of energy. You see, when you embrace, as these foolish assholes do, and that is exactly what they are, when you embrace atomism, you are entrapped into this belief system that there are messenger particles. What you're doing is you're actually evoking magic and mysticism. If you actually define the terms mysticism and magic, that is exactly what quantum mechanics believes in. It believes in invisible messenger particles that have never been the input or output of any experiment ever done by anybody on this earth, as the mediator of so-called magnetic attraction and so-called magnetic repulsion, the mediators of everything, EPR, instantaneous action at a distance, the idiot Einstein. And yes, I actually call Einstein an idiot because that's exactly what Nikola Tesla called Einstein. He called him an idiot. He called him a fuzzy-haired crackpot. He called him a lunatic. He called him an emperor dressed in purple robes. Excuse me, a beggar dressed in the purple robes of a king. So that's actually not my accusation of Einstein. It's Nikola Tesla's, who of course was a real scientist, a real inventor. If that is the best that quantum mechanics has, is this, and Richard Feynman, the one reason people believe so much in him is the same opium, this opium of personality, and that is exactly what it is. Stupid people always fall for this opium. And I tell you what it is, it's not literally opium. The opium that people fall for in personality is someone with a tremendous amount of charisma. If you've got a lot of charisma, that's why used car salesmen, for example, trying to sell you, back in the day, they'd sell you shitty cars that were really crap. They had a lot of charisma. What they do is they pat you on your back and say all sorts of funny things that would make you buy crap that no sensible person would buy. People with a lot of charisma can make you believe in all sorts. That's how cult leaders are formed. Every major sick-ass cult has been started by some crazy nut job with a lot of charisma. If someone said back in the day, you know, I'm going to start this crazy-ass religion as a tax dodge, you know, just to prove you wrong, as a bar bet, by the way, create this crazy religion, and, you know, it's going to be based upon holding these two electrode devices in your hand. And it's going to be about crazy aliens from another planet, and you know, I'm going to get, you know, you see, but that's crazy. You know, I think you know what crazy religion I'm talking about. Charisma. Richard Feynman had a lot of charisma. I know one thing for certain: a revolution will occur as long as humanity doesn't destroy itself. Within the next 10 years or so, a revolution will occur where rationalism will be brought back into the scientific, I don't know if it will be brought back in the scientific community, because scientists today are not scientists by definition of the Aristotelian or Platonic definition of scientists. What they are mathematicians. Mathematicians don't believe in anything that they can't quantify. This is where the root of quantum comes from. Quantum, quantity, to count or atomize, i.e. particleize. This is why every aspect of quantum believes in particleizing everything. There's no such thing as a photon. There's no such thing as an electron. There's no such thing as virtual photons. There is one thing that the great minds of Tesla, James Clerk Maxwell, Oliver Heaviside, and Charles Proteus Steinmetz all said, is that the notion that there is a charge-carrying particle, i.e. the electron, is epic BS. No, they didn't use the words BS. Well, one of them did. But they all said the same thing. There's no such thing as a charge-carrying particle. When you atomize, this is atomism. This sick mental virus of the intellectually inept was destroyed many, many thousands of years ago in ancient Greece. But of course it exists again today. Of course it would logically so reappear today, because today there are more materialists than ever there were before. That doesn't mean that religion is something better, because I'm no person that praises religion, rather metaphysics. Metaphysics, of course, is something real, something genuine. It is scientific in the truest sense of Platonian, Pythagorean, and Aristotelian science, but it is not atomistic. This brain virus of atomism has to end at some point in time. If you think that particles are being exchanged between magnets, I mean, that is ridiculous. That's not the input or output of any experiment ever done. These are what these PhD, what they are is occultists. Every person that is highly renowned currently, and some of the ones recently dead, like Richard Feynman, currently living, Leonard Susskind, all of these people, what they are is occultists. They're literally telling you that the invisible medium that's going on between things is particles, invisible particles. There's no such thing as an electron. A photon is an arbitrary concept created back in the 1917? I got the article on where the photon came from. The concept of the photon. There's, of course, no such thing as a light particle. People say, well, it's the quantization of light. You know, light is not really a particle, but we say photon. No, there are all of these people in quantum and relativity, they literally believe. Not only that, they reify things that have no properties, like space and time. Time is a measure of magnitudes, and space has no properties at all. It only has attributes. These people are mentally insane. They are not rational. What they are is highly acclaimed mathematicians who are occultists. The religion of mathematicians is, of course, only things that can be quantified, i.e. counted. That is the root basis of math, right? If you can't count it, then why would a mathematician be interested in it? Modern scientists today are not scientists by definition. They are occultists. They are mathematicians. Given the fact that there is no quantifiable interaction between magnets and EPR, instantaneous action, they have particleized all of these things. They particleized light. They particleized energy transfer, the electron. If you think that there's a gazillion electron particles per millisecond passing through the power lines in your backyard like toothpaste through a tube, then you are deranged and you've been brainwashed by these sick-ass mathematician occultists. Quantum is the occult. It is not rational. It has no basis in reality. Explaining magnetism is extremely simple. That invisible medium is, of course, the ether. All forms of energy are ether modalities. To think that gravity is one thing, magnetism another, and electricity another is as stupid as a pathetic child thinking that ice, water, and steam are different things. Like, no, they're not. They're all water. They're different modalities of water due to temperature and pressure, so on and so forth. It's all water. There's no distinction or disparity between, and of course gravity doesn't exist. Gravity is only the reification of a different sort of attribute of mutual mass acceleration as opposed to that of magnetic attraction. Magnetism is by definition centrifugal. It is force in motion, and it cannot be attractive, which is increasing inertia and acceleration, i.e. centripetal. There's no such thing as magnetic attraction. That's like saying a huge charge-discharge, which is completely illogical. That is point-specific mutual mass acceleration, but not towards each other, but towards a null point. This is even visible underneath the ferrocell. Gravitational masses do not accelerate towards one another. They accelerate towards a null point. The null point, of course, is a low pressure point in the ether. It is the ether itself. Why do you think things accelerate towards one another? They're not accelerating towards one another. They're accelerating towards a null point, the same way magnets accelerate. When people say magnets, they don't actually know what they're saying. Magnetism is an attribute of point source field modality, the actual magnetic field that, of course, fascinates people so much, that extends outside of the magnet. A magnet doesn't emit anything. The point source coherency of a magnet that defines a magnet, which is not quantitative, but it is qualitative. Before a magnet becomes a magnet, it's exactly the same quantitatively before it becomes a magnet and after it becomes a magnet. The only difference is in the qualitative nature of that point source field coherency that defines the magnet, at which point the field extends outside or ab extra to the mass itself that we now call the magnet. Yes, folks, I can literally say I wrote the book on magnetism, and I can literally say I'm the first human being on this earth that has accurately defined what the hell specifically explained. Because descriptions are not explanations. If you never remember anything else, remember that. Descriptions are not explanations. Sounds like I'm tooting my own horn saying that, but I'm still correct. No one else throughout history has ever defined what magnetism is, how it works, why it works. You can't define any field modality or energy. When we talk about field modalities, we're talking about ether modalities. When we talk about ether modalities, we're talking about energy manifestations, i.e. ether perturbations. You can't define those using discrete particles. This is the absolute trap, the suicide, the hangman's noose, the dagger through the heart of all quantum mechanics, which is mathematics. It is mysticism. It is occultish. They literally believe these invisible unicorn particles. This is not my opinion. This is their own words. Look it up on Wikipedia. Go look it up in QED, Strange Theory of Light and Matter by Richard Feynman. Just type in virtual particles or virtual photons, or type in what's going on between magnets. You'll find an answer from the quantum mystics, the occultists. Virtual photons are being exchanged between magnets, and this is why they accelerate or repel. That is bullshit. That is a completely invented concept, like me talking about unicorns and leprechauns. It's ridiculous. Well, I've got a PhD, you know, I know what I'm talking about. Sure you do. The only people that you can get to believe that crap is if you've got enough of charisma, like a crazy cult leader, to brainwash stupid people. Well, that guy's got a PhD, I'm going to believe what he says. You know, not that bald tattooed guy that's actually spent a tremendous amount of time and mental energy over countless years actually figuring out the way shit works. Really works! That's what these people are. They're occultists. It is a type of crazy mysticism based in atomistic thinking, but the universe doesn't work that way. Mother Nature is not a crazy hooker on crack with a bag of magic particles. Everything is force and motion, inertia and acceleration. Everything is pressure mediation. All forms of energy are ether perturbations. Just as there's no distinction between ice, water, and steam, these are just different states of one and the same thing. Water, right? There's no distinction between gravity, magnetism, or electricity. Electricity is 5 times psi equals Q in Planck of electrification, a hybrid of dielectricity and magnetism. And gravity is merely non-point source mass acceleration. Mutual mass acceleration, not towards one another, but towards the lowest pressure point in the ether. And of course, the mass itself is an ether. The last thing I actually had to figure out as far as cosmic mechanics was the disparity between light and matter. I've actually finally reconciled that completely with 100% certainty. The first thing I wanted to figure out countless ages ago was to figure out magnetism. I've fully done that. Even though I'm still working on my book is really done. I just have hundreds of pages of notes that I have to stick into the book. I figured out magnetism. The last thing I had to figure out was the reconciliation of light and matter. And I have reconciled that. I hope I live long enough to write the book on that particular topic. But first I have to write a book on apophatism after I finish up the book. Anyway, I hope you like these videos. Go deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole until I bore the hell out of everybody. But if you like these videos, since I don't sell anything, you could always drop a donation. You could tell me how much you hate me. Whatever works for you, okay? But one thing for certain, if I drop dead tomorrow, I'll still be the first person on Earth that figured out what magnetism is and how it works. And I mean that. Serious as a heart attack.